All right, hey everybody, welcome to Trailbuilding Talk Thursdays. I have Alf here from the Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association, so we're gonna have a bit of a chat on all things in the West Bragg and Bragg Creek area. So welcome, Alf.
Well,
thank you for joining tonight. I don't know if you have your favorite beverage. I do, so I'm gonna cheers to you, even if you don't have one.
I've got a coffee with me today.
Perfect. Okay, so first question for Alf here. How long have you been mountain biking for? How did you get into mountain biking?
You know, I don't exactly know, but it was sometime in the 80s, in the late 80s. And I remember, using a book like this as the way of finding out where some of the mountain bike possibilities were. Essentially, there were no mountain bike trails. It was just horrible riding on hiking trails, for the most part, but a lot of fun. And yeah, one of the things was, one of the motivations for me was really to sort of do, extend my hiking and backpacking and scrambling by getting two places on a bike.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, and what is your favorite trail?
Well, I know it's lots of people like it, but my favorite has got to be Merlin View and Kestrel, actually.
Nice.
And I can't wait for Kestrel to connect all the way through and make a bigger loop.
Yep, I know, that's pretty exciting. Okay, and next question. How did you get involved with the Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association?
Well, the way I got involved originally was that the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association was looking at developing an all-season trail plan, or a plan for the trail network in that area. And at that point, this was about 2009, the trail network at West Bragg Creek really consisted of cross-country ski trails and Tom Snow. That was about it. Yep. And they were horrible for anything other than snow activities, winter activities, and maybe equestrian use. And the basic idea was, could we make this a year-round trail network from basically a winter trail network? So the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association got a group of people together, including myself, to develop a proposal to the government for a trails plan, a larger trails plan. And that was in 2009, 2010. We went through a public consultation process with that plan. And 2010, that plan was approved by the government. And then we started building, and it got approved September 4th, 2009. We started building 2010, or September 10th. So we didn't wait very long to get going on the trail.
Nice. And I know personally, I'm very happy that you got going as quickly as you could. It's amazing what you guys have done, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's total, we went from about a 43-kilometer trail network to 163 kilometers. So we've added a lot of trails, and a lot of them are single track trails. We've also expanded the ski trail network and winter trails. I guess a whole idea that never existed prior to this trail was the idea of sort of separate snowshoe and fat bike trails, which we've got.
Yeah, anyway, it's just amazing what you guys have done in such a short period of time as well. Really. Okay, so and then next question here, what trails and areas does Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association look after?
Well, if you can bring up a map, I can kind of talk you through it.
Yep, no worries. So I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. All right, can you see my screen with the map?
All right. So, perfect. So the West Bragg Creek Trail Network is large. It extends from you can see the West Bragg Creek parking lot there in the middle, but if you scroll down, you'll see at the bottom, you'll see the Fullerton Trailhead and Station Flats.
Yep.
And that's off of Highway 66. Well, the Fullerton Trailhead, Allenville parking area, and Station Flats are the south end of the West Bragg Creek Trail Network. The west edge of the trail network is where Ridgeback runs. And Ridgeback is managed by the Calgary Mountain Bike Alliance. and all the trails in the sort of southwest corner of that map are managed by the Moose Mountain Bike Trail Society. But everything from Ridgeback to the east to the Kananaskis Country boundary, and then all the way north to past the West Bragg Creek parking lot and north of Mountain Road, and all the way up to the top of Telephone Loop and Merlin View and Tom Snow to where Kestrel joins Tom Snow is all West Bragg Creek. So it's a large area.
It is a super large area. Okay, next question. What stakeholders and land managers do you work with, and how do those relationships work?
Well, that actually is also a very good question. We work directly. We have the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association has a 10-year cooperating agreement with Alberta Parks and with actually with two parts of Alberta Environment and Parks. We have with Alberta Parks and with the public lands side of Alberta Parks. And they're actually two separate departments that don't always talk to each other.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
And we end up working with both. The part of the West Bragg Creek Trail System that is parks is really the provincial recreation area, which is about 100 meters around the parking lot at West Bragg Creek.
Wow.
It's not a very big part.
Yep.
And all the rest of it is on public land,
Yep.
which is operated by a different agency from parks.
Mhm.
And people with dogs will know the difference right away, because if you're in the parking lot, you have to have your dog on a leash. But
Yep.
as soon as you go about 100 meters any direction from the parking lot, the dogs can be off leash. And the reason is that that's public land, and parks and public lands have different rules with respect to dogs and a lot of other things.
Yeah, fair enough. Hmm.
The other stakeholders we end up dealing with are certainly in the planning processes. We end up dealing with people that are from all the different activity groups. So the West Bragg Creek Trails are multi-user trails. It's a multi-user trail network. There are no specific mountain bike trails. There are no specific snowshoe trails or fat bike trails or anything. They're all multi-user, but not every user gets to use every trail all the time. So there are trails like Fullerton, for example, which are hiking only, or the cross-country ski trails are ski only in the winter. But the overall network includes all users. And so for the most part, the single track trails are multiple users. So it could be hikers or equestrians or trail runners or mountain bikers or whatever that are using them.
Mm. Oh, fair enough.
And our consultations involves all those different groups.
Mm. Fair enough. Okay, so next question, what projects is Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association working on this season, and will projects be able to go ahead in light of the COVID-19 situation?
Another good question. That the way the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association, the way I do anyways, for the trails program approach the trails, is there's two phases. There's a maintenance phase and a construction phase, a new construction phase. And generally what we like to do is in the early season and again in the late season is to focus on the maintenance. So get the trails all buffed up for the season, get the drainage cleaned out, get any problems, down trees, that kind of stuff sorted out early on in the season, and have the trails ready to go, the existing trails ready to go. And then when conditions are much better for trail construction is to start building the new trails a little bit later on in the summer. So, for example, early in the season, we'll start off with trails like Bragg and Wrights or Ranger or Strange Brew and those kinds of things, Merlin, and start cleaning those out and making sure the drainage is working well, making sure that any ruts or problem areas that have developed over the winter are fixed, and get those ready to go. And particularly after a period of things being shut down, is going back in and seeing, are there trees down? Is there anything that's gotten destroyed on the trails one way or the other? So, and fixing those. And our big build this year will be to reconstruct and upgrade Tom Snow from the north end of Moose Loop, where we've built a single track trail last year, to Kestrel, and connect Kestrel through to Tom Snow. And that will allow for a big loop from Merlin to Kestrel to Tom Snow, but it will also allow people to start at Highway 68 at the Spruce Woods Dayu site or Dawson and ride the newer portion of Tom Snow that was constructed in 2017 by Parks to Kestrel and do a loop including Kestrel and Merlin from that direction as well. So it'll be probably about the same distances as from West Bragg Creek, but allow people to have two ways of doing those loops.
And then that trail will connect to Jumpingpound Cox Hill as well, right?
It will, yeah. So if you, from just about the Kestrel, where the Kestrel Junction will be, from there north to the Husky Jumpingpound Road has actually been rebuilt and is getting almost no use. It's a brand new trail. It's actually quite a nice flowy trail with not particularly a lot of elevation gain. It has a lot of ups and downs, but not a lot of net elevation gain to it. It roughly follows about the 1,500 meter contour interval on a higher bench above Moose Creek. And
so, sorry, where is that trail?
This is from south of the Jumpingpound Demonstration Forest Loop, South Loop.
Okay.
From there, or the road that goes up to the Husky Well site on Moose Mountain.
Oh yeah.
But from the Highway 68 end. From there south, so not all the way to Dawson, but from that point south for about 9 kilometers. That trail is in 2017 and 18 was completely rebuilt, and is, like I said, it's actually quite a nice trail. It's amazingly nicely made trail.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get any use because it doesn't connect to anything.
Oh yeah, yep. But now it will.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Okay, so next point here I wanted to talk about is trail etiquette and how our members can lower their impact on the trails at this time of year when everything is thawing.
Well, the first thing is to plan ahead and try to get as much information as possible about what kind of condition the trails are in. And I haven't been out to the West Bragg Creek Trails for a couple of weeks actually, but friends who are in the area and have looked around. The biggest problem is this has been the snowiest winter in 40 years. Yeah. Which was great for skiing and fat biking and stuff, but it's meant a very slow melt off right now. And so almost all of the trails are mostly wet or mud or snow covered or ice covered. Yeah. So they're in really tough shape right now, but nobody's been out there to update trail reports. So in the next day or so, we'll hopefully see some new trail reports on those areas. But I wouldn't expect that they will be in good shape for a couple of weeks yet, actually.
Oh, fair enough.
Just because they had so much snow this year. But yeah, so the first thing is to find out what conditions are like and to use some of the sites like the Facebook sites and stuff like that to get information about how things are riding, how they're performing. And the other one is if you get out there and you see that the trails are wet and soggy and you're leaving tire tracks, is just think about it and turn around and head back because you will be destroying the trails at that point.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now there's a lot of trails like Bragg and Rights that will start out nice and dry because they're on a south facing aspect and will be good to go for a kilometer or two, and then you get into wetter, more shaded areas, and you'll have puddles or wet areas to deal with. And so if what you're looking at is a small puddle on a normally firm trail, the best thing to do is just to ride through it relatively slowly. Don't go too fast, don't cause too much splashing, but just ride through it. What I do personally, when I see something like that, I actually get off my bike and I look and I say, is there some way I can create a nick or something to get the water to drain off this trail? So, which isn't going to help me for that moment. It will take an hour or two for the thing to dry out. But quite often there's some blockage that's causing a piece of trail to hold water. And if you can identify that and get the water to drain off, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, if you're coming across a section that's wet and soft and muddy, but it's not too long, rather than riding through and making deeper ruts, it is better to get off the bike and walk around it in such a way that maybe the tires stay on the tread, but that you're walking on rocks and sticks and things like that that are not impacting the vegetation too much.
Yeah.
Walking as a general rule will cause less damage than riding around. Riding around on vegetation will widen the trail and will create a bigger problem, basically.
Yep. Fair enough. We had an exciting announcement today.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead and share. Yeah.
So the question you were asking was whether we would be able to get out on these trails or do trail work soon. And yes, the parks and the public lands areas and the roads leading to them and the parking lots will be open for day use as of tomorrow. So trails and access will begin right away, which is great.
Yeah, that's awesome news. That's very exciting. Nice. So we can hopefully do our trail day with you guys.
Exactly.
Yes, and on that note as well, yeah, I know we were chatting over email about potentially doing like a overnight bike packing kind of trail weekend this year. Yeah,
so one of the trails, or the main trail we're building as a new build this year, is the Tom Snow upgrade, and it's basically about 6 or 7 kilometers from the parking lot to get to where the work starts, and then we're building about 5 kilometers of trail. So it'll be sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 kilometers away from the parking lot where we're working on the trail. And the most efficient way to get out there will actually be to spend a couple days working on there. So I'd really like to see a few volunteer trail weekends that involve 2 days where people can come out for a couple days and work on the trails and camp overnight. So that will require us to do a couple things. One is to find a good location for the camping. And the other thing that we would do as support is to help with getting stuff out there, like your overnight camping stuff, so that you can just ride in with light gear, and maybe we can use a quad or motorcycles to get equipment into where the camping will be.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and yeah. I think it might give members an opportunity to try out some of their bike packing gear that maybe they haven't used yet, on a short trip. So
exactly,
that would be a lot of fun. Yeah. Okay, next question here. How is the Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association funded, and how will the UCP cuts to Alberta Parks and Trails impact Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association's ability to carry out its mandate and work?
Those are really two questions. The first one is, how is the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association funded? It's basically funded by donations and some grants, but mostly donations. So I think the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association has raised about $1.6 million over the last 10 years to build the trail network that we have.
That's amazing.
And the other part is we've got about 60,000 hours of volunteer time that have gone into building the trails as well. So both of those things together is how the trails are funded. Now the question is that enough? And it's, I guess one of the interesting things, it's always been sort of easier to get money to build new trails. But as you get a larger trail network, what becomes a bigger and bigger part of the budget consideration for an organization that, like the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association, is operating costs, like just doing maintenance and doing fat bike grooming and doing cross-country ski grooming and that kind of stuff. And that becomes a very big part, much bigger part of the cost. And it tends to be harder to get donors to donate for just operations.
Yep.
So we've been pretty successful with getting donations from donors, but in reality, that represents probably about 30% of what we really need to operate. So that's a gap for sure. The second question is, how will the announced cuts to parks and Alberta Environment and Parks affect us? And the West Bragg Creek and the provincial recreation area around West Bragg Creek are not included in that list of cuts. And there's no, because we haven't been getting money for the trails from parks anyways, it won't really affect that end of the operation, like whether we build trails or can maintain trails. So that part it doesn't really change. But what's interesting is that the announcement from the provincial government actually wasn't entirely to just close parks and stop doing things like ski grooming. What it was to do things differently. And the government has an objective of working more closely with non-government groups like the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association. So we may in fact get more support than we have as a result of being a non-government agency.
Yeah.
So, I don't know any details there, but that is something that may be expected to happen. And the other thing is that the province is looking at, the government had in their election platform a couple of suggestions, and one of them was to write something called an Alberta's Trails Act, which would both facilitate non-government groups in the building and construction of trails and that kind of thing, but also would protect the trails themselves legislatively. So they would have a little higher status on the land than they do right now, just legally. But there's no details on any of that. So we'll have to see how that works. And one of the other platforms that they had was to start charging a user fee for off-highway vehicle users, or as a license fee, as a parking fee, and that money would go directly to trail construction and trail infrastructure. And I guess one question that everybody who isn't an off-highway vehicle user probably needs to ask is, why wouldn't that concept be extended to all users? And if, for example, there was a hang tag or a license sticker or something that you could do to prove that you paid in their platform, they said $35, but paid $35 a year, and that money went all to trails. That would amount to a substantial amount of money, province-wide for sure. So there are some possibilities coming other than just donations for organizations like Moose Mountain Bike Trail Society or the Greater Bragg Creek Trails Association or CAMBA or something. Yeah,
and I don't know. I just with my background in the environment industry, I know off vehicle use is or off highway vehicle use is pretty frowned upon and can impact communities' water, for example. So I think that's a great initiative to try and make them pay.
And to use the money
for some of their use as well, and put the money towards something worthwhile.
And also just the idea of actually, one of the big problems with off-highway vehicle uses has been that there has been very little money spent or none to build trails and maintain trails, and especially deal with things like bridges and stuff like that. So if there is a fund to do that, that will certainly help that. That doesn't make any difference for mountain biking, but if trails were looked at province-wide as an important piece of infrastructure, the way they are in British Columbia, that would be a big improvement.
Yep. So that's another one of my questions. So just comparing Alberta and BC and how the trails are funded there, because BC have so many more grants, and I think they see the value more in creating these mountain bike tourist destination towns like Squamish and Fernie. And it would just be great to see the same thing in Cameron, Bragg Creek, and Crow's Nest Pass.
Well, I agree. And I think that's where groups like individual clubs or associations of clubs or organizations that speak for various groups, outdoor recreation groups, can be or probably should be talking to and lobbying the government, essentially on this question of expanding what they're promising to do for off-highway vehicle users to all users. In British Columbia, they're using money from the logging industry and from BC Hydro as a source for some of the funding, as well as tourism levies, hotel fees, and things like that, that go into a fund which gets used for the development of trails on parks and public lands, particularly on public lands. And that's a really good model, is basically to support the non-government organizations to do the trail building and maintenance, and to use the government as a way to support those organizations, and also to provide education and set standards and that kind of thing. And as you've noted, as lots of people have noted, what that ends up doing is it creates a viable, low impact tourism industry that depends on people recreating and enjoying themselves. Yeah,
definitely. And it's kind of I guess with the off-highway vehicle use as well, an interesting example is Moab down in Utah, because basically the off-highway vehicle users created those trails initially. Anyway, it's just interesting when you're riding down there and you see like an off-highway vehicle on slick rock zooming past you. You just kind of pull over and let them by. Anyway, it's just kind of great that they're working together. I'm sure that I'm sure the mountain bike trails have been funded from off-highway vehicle users because they built them initially, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about Moab, but other places that sometimes happens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, but yeah. Okay, next question. Okay, do you see the Bow 80 or a similar race event in West Bragg once Kestrel will connect to Jumpingpound, Cox Hill to Bragg Creek?
Well, I'd certainly like to see something like the Bow 80 restart, and right now that is one of the links that's missing. Is how do you finish the connections? So I think we'll see that. I think we'll probably see other events like Trans Rockies and that kind of thing at West Bragg Creek as well. And I think going forward, the government's, from what I understand, their plan is that the ideal staging area for bigger events would probably be Station Flats, if and when Station Flats got redeveloped as a larger trailhead. And who knows when that might happen.
Sorry, Station Flats is public land?
It's actually the area that the actual Station Flats is part of the parks.
Oh, it is parks, okay.
But the land all around it is public land.
Yep.
So my understanding is the parks people would like to see that eventually become a larger staging area, and feed into the trail network, the West Bragg Creek Trail Network, or the Moose Mountain Trail Network. Yeah.
That sounds great. Huh? Nice. Okay, next question here. How do you feel about the popularity of freeride mountain biking and alpine terrain and peak bagging and all that kind of thing?
Well, as I said, that's actually kind of how I started into mountain biking, was maybe not riding in alpine terrain, but using a bike to extend my hiking or backpacking or scrambling, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's interesting. The one thing that parks and public land areas have often done is being very slow to react to new trends. And well, actually, if you look at Kananaskis Country, very, very slow to consider or build any new trails. And so a lot of things have sort of evolved outside of places like West Bragg Creek, with people just doing things, and the trails end up happening as a result. And that can be seen as an environmental impact, and especially if a trail hasn't been planned or thought out, you can end up creating problems by doing that. But on the other hand, if you think of a more alpine type area, like in the foothills, say something more like Jumpingpound Ridge or something like that, or Prairie Mountain or something, those kinds of things, there's no reason why a good, well-planned trail that's high up and in sort of out of the trees couldn't evolve and exist. And it would, certainly be something that would attract hikers and backpackers as well as mountain bikers. And for that to work, it would have to be properly designed with drainage and protection of sensitive species and all that kind of stuff in mind. But I actually think it has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I think so too. And just other areas like Whistler, Revelstoke. I know Golden has like 3 alpine trails planned. I love other locations. Well, they're all in BC again. But yeah, I agree. Like, I think K Country has a lot of potential for those kind of trails. They'd be very well used, and it would bring more people, more tourists to this area as well. So yeah,
and I think more than likely you would see more of that on the eastern side. Something like perhaps Forget-Me-Not Ridge, that kind of thing, rather than further into the mountains. And the main reason is that our summer season is quite short, and the dry season, the season that the ground is dry enough to allow a lot of traffic on some of the alpine areas, is really short.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
But the foothills are a lot better that way.
No, fair enough. This is kind of another question along the alpine. Do you think that permitting would ever be possible to do bikepacking in K Country, like just off in the kind of middle of nowhere? 'Cause, we had this conversation before we started recording, but I know I have a lot of friends that are alpine climbers. Like, I'm a backcountry skier, so you can just kind of go and climb or ski wherever you want, but you can't do the same thing with biking, because as we're talking about, some alpine environments are very environmentally sensitive. But anyway, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you sort of can. The big problem is that it depends on where. So the main mountain part of the parks tend not to be designed particularly for loop or long distance. They tend to be a little bit more in-out kind of trails, and most of them don't. A lot of them don't allow bikes at all. But there's a lot of places in the highwood, for example, or the Sheep, that have the potential for that. But nothing's ever been developed or evolved there. And I mean, you certainly see in those areas, for example, equestrians do that for several days or weeks at a time in pretty alpine areas. And so it's not a question of you're not necessarily, you could go there. You're not like you're not allowed to. It's just that the trail infrastructure really isn't great for biking.
Fair enough. Okay, next question here. Do you think that campgrounds for bikepackers could be created within the Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association area in the coming years?
I think so. There's a couple of places where that it makes sense, and one of them is that the Great Trail, or the Trans-Canada Trail, cuts through West Bragg Creek it includes all of Iron Creek, Boundary Ridge, Bragg and Wrights, Kestrel, and Tom Snow, and that's a long ways. And especially if you're traveling across country, or you're doing that as part of a longer ride. So, say, for example, if you wanted to start at Bragg Creek and go all the way to the High Rockies, well, it's gonna take a few days to do that. And so where would you camp? And right now, everything within beyond a kilometer of the West Bragg Creek parking lot is on public land and is available for random camping. So you could, in fact, camp anywhere there. But the problem with leaving it totally open-ended, like like that is just, so where is a good spot? You know, where's there dry ground? Where's there good water? Those kinds of questions. And, you know, perhaps as part of upgrading and building Tom Snow, we will probably have to find a few spots like that for our own crews anyways. But if we do, those would certainly become recommended random camping areas and potentially in the future designated sites. One of the problems in right now with Kananaskis in terms of the designated backcountry campsites is that Parks somehow thinks that they need to helicopter in firewood for everybody that's camping there, and therefore, and then charge people to camp. Whereas the random camping areas in Kananaskis include a lot of places that used to be designated campgrounds, and there's no servicing provided to those anymore. But that doesn't mean you can't camp there. You can still camp there. So an example might be the 3 Point Campground in the upper Sheep area. You could in fact do a multi-day bike and camping trip there and camp at what used to be a designated campsite, which is still in nice shape for camping, but no services and no charge.
Well, just go. You have to be self-sufficient, I think, when you're in the backcountry. So bring what you need in there, huh? That sounds like a pretty fun adventure. Okay, and what is the Greater Bragg Creek Trail Association's long-range plans?
Another fine question, actually. We are in the very early stages of starting version 2.0 of the all-season trails plan. So the original trails plan that was approved in 2010 basically thought through the idea of going from a winter-only trail network to an all-season trail network, and going from 43 kilometers to trail to 130 or 40 or 50 kilometers of trail. We actually ended up at 163, but things happen. Anyways, so now we're looking at what's the next stage. Where do we go from here? And the general direction is probably not a lot of really big new greenfield trails, but more, we will likely be looking at connectors and links that would make things, you know, long loops have a shorter option, or allow several short loops to become a longer loop. So that kind of thing. So an example might be to have a connector trail between the bottom of Sugar Mama and Sugar Daddy, so you don't have to be on Elbow Trail.
Oh yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yep.
Ways of connecting Tom Snow to the Moose single track, so you can go all the way from Highway 68 to Highway 66 on more or less some kind of a combination of Tom Snow or Kestrel or Merlin, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I know I did the single track 6 in 2018, and there's just so many awesome loops you can do in West Bragg. Like, that's primarily where I rode to train, because it's amazing, the loops. So it's exciting to hear that you're going to be doing more connector trails, and I'm super excited about connecting West Bragg to Jumpingpound, Cox Hill, because that'll be a huge rise, but really fun. Yeah. Anyway, would you like to end and say anything else?
Well, I think earlier we chatted and you were asking something about sort of how the trails get graded at West Bragg Creek.
Yes.
Essentially what we do is we don't specifically grade the trails. It's actually Trail Forks, that whoever puts stuff up on Trail Forks, that grades them for us. And we like, if they don't match or they don't line up with what we think, we will comment, and they may get changed or not. But as a general rule, when the trails were designed, the idea of the West Bragg Creek Trail Network was to create a trail network that roughly fit in to the high end of the green trails or the low end of the blue trails from the International Mountain Bike Association classifications is what it is.
Yep.
So our average trail has an average grade of 6 to 7% climbing grade. And on the IMBA classifications, if a trail is 5% or less, it's green. And if it's over 5%, it's blue. So ours are kind of at the bottom end of the blue and at the top end of the green. And so that's really where the West Bragg trails generally fit in. They can get pretty well call almost all of them blue except for green sections, or green except for blue sections, so something along those lines. Sort of one of the things that we've thought about is just where they fit into the bigger picture in Kananaskis Country. So we're adjacent to Ridgeback and Moose Mountain, and there's sort of a continuum of trails that goes from the easier, more flowy cross-country style at West Bragg to more downhill at Moose Mountain, and Ridgeback is kind of in between there. So physically and in terms of character of the trail as well.
Definitely. Yeah, like I love connecting West Bragg to the Station Flats area. Like I love Moose Packers. It's an old school trail now, but it's great. Anyway. Yeah, thank you so much for our chat tonight. You guys have done such an amazing job with the Trail Network, and I know they're heavily used and supported by our club. So and I'm really looking forward to getting out and doing a trail day with you and that bikepacking trail maintenance weekend. Sounds like a lot of fun.
That's right. Well, now it looks like it's possible that we can do our, get the schedule back up again and do our trail days early in May like we had planned, which is great.
It's going to be amazing. Well, thanks a lot, Al. I look forward to working with you this summer.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.